2025 has been another year of Ducati dominance when you look at it on paper. There have been 16 out of the 18 Grand Prix wins go the way of the Borgo Panigale factory. 16 of the 18 sprint wins have went Ducati's way. 2 of the Grand Prix wins have went the way of Aprilia with Marco Bezzecchi at Silverstone, and 1 of the way of Honda with Johann Zarco in the wet at Le Mans. 2 of the sprint wins have also been won by Aprilia. And then you look at the standings of the Constructors' table. Ducati currently, at the time of this video has been recorded, have obviously wrapped up the Constructors' World title. They lead by 646 points to Aprilia's 308. KTM are on 280. Honda are on 236. Yamaha are on 190. And in the Teams Championship, they currently hold 1, 2 and 3, which is every single Ducati team on the grid, and that is Ducati Lenovo, BK Aggressini and VR46 Pertamina. The closest team to that is the factory KTM team. Ducati have also done the Triple Crown, which is the Riders' World Championship, of course Marc Marquez, World Champion, Constructors and Teams. But when you look at it outside of the stats purely, this has been probably for the first time in 5 years that Ducati have had more dips than they've had in recent times. They are currently missing their main man, Marc Marquez. He's going to be out for the next 2 rounds with injury. Pecco Bagnaia has had arguably the weirdest season I can ever remember for a rider who wins and then is last. I mean, it just doesn't happen. The satellite team of Gresini, to their credit, they're holding Ducati high at the minute with Alex Marquez and Fermin Aldegar, especially in the last race in Indonesia. They were both on the podium. But the VR46 team, who have won GP25, which matches Bagnaia and Marquez, they've only scored a handful of podiums across the season in Grand Prix. Is this really the point where Ducati have just made a mistake this year? And they have relied on the excellence of Marc Marquez to hide the toughness essentially of this GP25 and how it's ridden? Or is this beginning of the turn where we see the likes of Aprilia, Honda, KTM get closer in the last year of the 1000cc regulations? Well, I think it could be more leaning towards the latter. I think history kind of suggests that at the end of regulation cycles, we get things bunching up. It happens across multiple forms of motorsport. It happens in F1 especially, and I don't mean to bring this up, but F1's a really good example. When it gets to the end of a cycle, I think immediately back to 2005, 2008, before we went into the new era of F1 with the change of car. 2021 is the best example of that. I mean, it went down to the last race, and of course whatever happened there. MotoGP's kind of had something similar. I think back to 2006, where it was going into the 800cc era in 2007. We got an epic title fight towards the end of that. And then 2015, obviously, it's not a real change, but we went to spec electronics and different tyres in 2016. And at the end of that, we had a really close fight between the 2 Yamahas. Of course, Honda struggled, but they were still there. We're seeing this change for MotoGP, and I think it's quite alarming when you've been used to something dominating for so long. Well, it seems like that anyway for Ducati. That there's little cracks starting to appear, and it's mainly down to the bike, of course, is the most important thing, the riders too, but are Ducati really lifting their foot off the pedal and focusing on 2027? Because I do think this needs to be factored into it. Things aren't going to change that much next year in terms of the bike for Ducati. The engine can't be touched. Of course, they can change frames, they can change swing arms, they can change pretty much everything apart from the engine. But the noise from the other manufacturers is the thing that I'm really interested in. as I think there is real positivity, especially coming out of Honda. I mean, Luca Marini has said that he believes that the 2026 bike is already better than the 2025 bike, and that 2025 Honda has arguably been the most improved bike across the season, and it's been getting a good run of form. It's been in the top five. It's been in the top three of the past few Grand Prix. And if Honda are getting their way and finding their way back to the front, the biggest brand in MotoGP, Ducati need to start looking over their shoulder because they haven't got Aprilia just to deal with. They've got the greatest to deal with essentially with Honda. I think that's a real promising thing, but how much of the time, as I said, are Ducati spending on 26? Do they just want to just give it in the hands of Marc Marquez, who will be back next season and hopefully fully fit, and say, listen, this is going to be essentially the same. You need to do what you've done this year, and 2027 it'll be fine when the regulations change. It's hard to say. I mean, in theory, when you look at it, it's always like, oh, they are preparing because they've got such a massive advantage. And I've, of course, read out the stats that they've dominated, really, they have. But it doesn't feel like that. It's strange. It's a weird thing. It's trying to look for weaknesses, and they've shown a lot. Maybe it's because of the struggles of Pecco Bagnaia. Maybe that is why the questions are starting to linger. And this sort of up and down nature of how the satellite, especially the VR46 team, how they've fluctuated throughout the year. Gresini have been really consistent, and to their credit, like I said, they have just got GP24s, the best bike on the grid, I believe, and they've just maximised it. But if it's any other year, Marc Marquez probably isn't in the factory team. Gresini are probably sitting there leading the championship with the riders of Alex Marquez, because Mark has been the sort of glue that's held it down. Because, yeah, people say, oh, he doesn't know how to, he can't develop a bike, he can just ride around the problems. That's the biggest lie ever. This bike was not made for Mark. He didn't have enough time to make it his own. He just jumped on it from the feedback that was given by Michele Pirro, Pecco Bagnaia, and whoever else has developed it in 24. Mark's got on it and went, well, fine, this will do the job. Pecco, obviously, is the other end of that. He just can't get his head around it and thinks that the 24 is the best option. But this does open up. Can Aprilia, when they fully turn it up next year, can they take it to Ducati from round one? I'd say yes. If you put them on the grid now in 2026 to where they are, it'd be so much closer. We'd have a proper title fight. But then I'm adding in the element of Honda, which I think is the most exciting prospect, because if that bike is starting to become what Honda are wanting it to be, we're in for a real treat next year. I think the only team that really is the outlier in this, because they're making such a big change in the last regulation of a 1000cc, is Yamaha. I mean, is that V4 really going to be the bike that's going to change their fortune in such a short space of time? I don't know. I see that more as a long-term project. But when I look at KTM, who have made gradual steps throughout the year, the bike, I mean, it's hard to say which riders are riding which in terms of frame and everything, but they've made steps. Pedro Acosta's made steps. We've had Enea Bastianini be on the podium. We've had top 4 results for Brad Binder, who struggled throughout the year. They've all progressed nicely back to where they should be. And this is it. Ducati need to just watch now, because the relationship, like I say, with Pecco, with the other teams, and how they're just going to extract the best from this package. We're in for a real treat in 2026. So do I think they're getting caught? Yes. Do I think they'll win the title next year? Yeah, they will, if Marc Marquez is fully fit and he's firing like he is in 2025. But will we see more manufacturers up the front? Absolutely. I don't think it'll be the case of Mark just being able to dominate the way he's done. I think he'll have to fight for it more. But really interesting. The bare facts say Ducati aren't being caught. But maybe we are to look at the race times, for example. They're a bit slower than last year. And Aprilia, Honda, KTM have all improved. But the margin Ducati had been so big. So yeah, 2026 could be the crowning glory of this generation. Of we get a really close title fight. I hope we do. but if Marc Marquez is about, it's going to be very difficult. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I've been thinking about it a lot because obviously the Mandalika weekend was such a disaster for Ducati, even though they ended up winning it. But it was a disaster in terms of the factory team. And I think that needs to be looked into a lot more. What's going on there? Of course, Marquez with injuries, a bit different, but with Pecco, let's see what happens when we get to Phillip Island. Yeah, leave your comments below, like the video, it's much appreciated, and we'll see you next week for the podcast.